Hi, so hopefully I am live right now, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to see your comments. I think I can see your comments now. So if you can see me and you're watching, can you just say hello so I know that you're there? If you're watching this live, if you can put hashtag live, and if you're watching the replay, put hashtag replay, and that just helps me to know who's watching. At any point, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on a replay, it would be great to see you doing some typing when I ask questions, if I ask questions. And okay, so we're going to be talking about, I had a question from Caitlin in the group who asked, let me read her question. It says, I was wondering about maintenance CST and knowing when it might not be beneficial for individuals anymore, and how to best have those conversations. So I thought that we put something together, and I was already thinking along these lines anyway, and having difficult conversations when somebody no longer meets your remit. So, and we have had experience of this, and I'm going to tell you a story that didn't go quite so well, and then I'm going to tell you a good story where it did go well, and hopefully can give you some top tips around how to have these conversations and how to prepare to have these conversations. So what you're going to learn in this, it's a very short one, this one, probably 10-15 minutes, why many facilitators hold on to people in their maintenance groups, even when they are no longer engaging, why we do that. The 3-step process that we have that ensures that all your beneficiaries are getting the best out of your group, and also how to manage the transition going forward, which can sometimes be quite tricky. And hopefully you'll see how this can help you feel better prepared to assess the suitability of people in your group and the suitability of CST. So thumbs up if you're happy with that. Do write in the comments. I don't know if I'm seeing the comments. I'm just going to have a quick look. No, not at the moment. Okay, so I'll just tell you who I am. So my name's Laura. I'm co-founder of Memory Matters Southwest CIC, which I run with my sister-in-law, Kate Smith, both nurses, frustrated about the lack of provision for people living with dementia. And Memory Matters has been going for 11 years this month. You may know us best for our city centre cafe Moments, which was designed by people living with dementia and has many different areas that you can sit in, different eras from the 1950s right the way through to the 1980s. So that's me, and that's who we are. And basically, we believe that people living with dementia can not only live well, but can thrive. And that is the crux of all the work that we do at Memory Matters. So I'm going to tell you a little story about somebody who came along to our CST group when we were running day clubs. So we were running, at that point, we were running 3 day clubs a week. And we had a gentleman, I'm going to call him Bert, not his real name, who came along to our groups. And Bert was a fantastically well-kept man in terms of he was incredibly smartly dressed. He used to wear Savile Row suits and tie, and was always beautifully, immaculately turned out. And you can imagine that actually that this was quite a difficult thing for his carer to keep up the appearance of Bert. And he would come along every session and be very enthusiastic. He'd been a high-flying businessman, and he was very charming and very cheeky, and a real asset actually to our group. Now, Bert really fitted into CST and into our groups and really enjoyed it and really benefited from it from a really long time. But Bert was coming along for a long time, and we certainly saw a deterioration, as we would expect. You know, we know that dementia is progressive. We expect people to, over time, for their dementia symptoms to become worse, and that certainly happened with Bert. The difficulty that we had was the fact that we could see that the carer, his wife, was really struggling at home, and we were really aware that these 3 days a week that we were able to provide were really, really important for her to get some respite. And we, in hindsight, believe that we didn't really deal with this as well as we could have done. And there was a lot of learning that took place, which I'm going to take you through in a minute. But I remember the first time that we attempted to have that difficult conversation with the carer, it didn't go well at all. Bert had been incontinent of urine, and we had had the conversation that unfortunately, as part of our remit, we can't necessarily look after people's personal care needs. That's part of the remit. The point was that actually we all knew that a good 4 or 5 months before, that actually Bert had deteriorated to the point where he really wasn't gaining so much out of coming along to the group anymore. And actually we were really holding him in that group as respite for the carer rather than for Bert. And that's not to diminish the needs of the carer, but we do stand at Memory Matters for the people living with dementia and making sure that we are meeting their needs first and foremost. And of course, the side effect, if you like, of that is that we also support people who are caring for them. In this instance, it really did feel like we were holding her up more than perhaps we were supporting Bert as much. So the first conversation that I had, she told me that he had a urine infection, and that's why it had happened, and I'm sure that was the case, and that he would get better and that he was on antibiotics. So we left it, and we left it a couple of weeks, and sure enough, that side of things got better. But the fact was that Bert still wasn't gaining as much out of the group as he could have been. So it was really apparent that the staff team were struggling a bit in terms of the amounts of times that he needed to get up to walk around because he wasn't engaging very well, and the effect that that was having on the group. We also knew that the wife was struggling, and it almost got us into this really difficult situation where, basically the transition was pretty terrible, if I'm honest. The last conversation that I had with Bert's wife, I had to be really strong and say to her that unfortunately Bert was unable to come along anymore. We had been trying for a very long time to help Bert to fit in, but essentially he didn't enjoy being in the groups anymore, and that we would have to stop the placement. Now, it was awful, and it was awful for all of us, but what was great was how we sat down and worked out what we would do differently going forward. And the good news is that we put some transition planning in place that hopefully you will find really useful to put into your CST groups. And I can clearly see, if this has come up as a question, that it's not just us that had the difficulty with this. It's very easy to get stuck into trying to keep everybody happy, and in actual fact we end up with in a really tricky situation. So my other story that I want to tell is the story of Malcolm, who's again another really well-dressed man. Although he didn't wear suits, he was more of a yacht shoes and jersey sort of man, full of smiles, really polite, lovely member of the group. And he would always stand. Every time a woman would stand, he would stand first. He was the last of the gentlemen, I think. And Malcolm and his wife received our transition planning protocol right at the beginning. So as they were introduced to the group, we told them what would happen at the end. So we said, we know that dementia is progressive, and there will come a time when Malcolm will no longer be able to come along to the group, but these are the things that we will do, and we laid these out in our protocol. So we were really honest about the fact that dementia is progressive. We weren't sort of hiding behind the fact that we were just going to look after everybody forever. So our aim in our protocol is to help people to thrive and live well in their communities, however that means. And sometimes that means that we're helping them to thrive, and other times it's about finding them a placement that works really well for them when it's not us. So we recognise that our provision doesn't always meet all of people's needs all of the time, and that's written in our protocol, and we discussed that right at the beginning. The other thing that we introduced was the PAL assessment, so the pool activity level assessment, which basically looks at somebody with dementias, where they are in their activity, so whether it's planned, exploratory, sensory or reflex. What we decided at Memory Matters is that those that fitted into mostly planned and some exploratory fitted really well into CST, and when we saw a deterioration, we would see the deterioration from planned into more of the exploratory field. So do look up, if you don't know the PAL assessment, then do look that up. If somebody is starting to score in the sensory, and definitely the reflex, but if they to score some in the sensory, then this is when we would be looking at having that conversation with the carer. Now, we also do the MICE assessment as well, so that's the mood, interest, communication, and I've forgotten. Mood, interest, communication, and someone will tell me in a minute in the comments, can't remember. So we do that as well, and this will show on a level of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 whether people are enjoying coming along to the groups, or whether they're showing that they're enjoying coming along to the groups. Now, those two things, when we see a trend where we're seeing reduced engagement, or we're seeing an expression of unmet need, which we can't meet within the group and is affecting the other group members, then this is the time when we would have a meeting. So we would ask the carer, the person with dementia, if that's appropriate, and if possible, a member of the community team to come in. So a community professional who is in charge of that person's care, so that we can talk about next steps. And at this point, we would talk to the carer about alternative provisions in the community. And what was really lovely with Malcolm is the whole of our staff team got involved with finding him an appropriate placement. So we did the research, we knew what he liked and what he enjoyed, and we were able to use that to find him an appropriate placement. For Malcolm, it was a farm placement where he was able to work in a workshop and take care of the animals. And what we did is we ran that alongside, so his trialling of that placement ran alongside his placement with us. And then we gradually withdrew, and the carer was able to up the hours for Malcolm in the other provision. And this was a beautiful transition. It's the first time that we did it, and that's how we do it now. So you can see how that first story of Bert that went so badly, I think for everybody, for Bert, for his carer, and for us, in the way that we felt, to now having something that is very structured in the way that we go forward, starting right from the beginning. And it makes that conversation so much easier when we have that conversation early on, rather than waiting until things have got really difficult, and it makes it really difficult for the whole team. The other thing, of course, is that you get to do a really good handover with the new provision as well. So all that lovely information that you've gleaned from spending time, for example, with Malcolm, then we could give all of that information over, which helped him to settle really nicely into his new placement. So I'm going to leave you with 3 things: assess, assess, assess. So if you don't use the PAL assessment, that's fine, but use something that makes it really easy for you to sit in front of the loved one and show where there's been some deterioration and where he may or they may be better placed somewhere else. Don't use your service as a sticking plaster. That's exactly what we were doing with Bert. So we knew that the carer was in distress, we knew that she was struggling, and we knew that our provision was helping her to continue caring at home. But of course, you can imagine when we took 3 days a week, what that was like for her. And then the other thing is to get other organisations to fill that gap. So you're not there to fill that gap. That's not your remit to do that, but it is about bringing in other stakeholders to make sure that those gaps can be filled. So if you've got any questions at all, please do pop them in the comments. It would be lovely, actually, those of you there, if you can just give me a wave, that would be amazing. If you're watching this on the replay, then please do add comments anyway, and I will return to it and make sure that I can answer any comments that I haven't answered already. So that's it in a nutshell. If there are no questions, nope, I'm going to go. Bye. Bye, Rachel.